Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. We are taking it back to basics today, and we'll talk about getting started with Office 365. Before we begin, I just wanted to go over a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded. We will email a link to the deck as well as the recording after the webinar at some point this afternoon. We're going to keep the session to about 45-50 minutes, and we'll leave about 10 minutes for questions at the end. If you do have questions during the webinar, please use the questions pane in the GoToWebinar menu and submit them there. And like I said, we'll leave them to the end. And with that, we have our speaker today, Jill Hanneman with Witham, and I will hand it off to you, Jill.
Great. Thanks so much, Sasha. Hi, everyone. I hope you guys are enjoying a start to the summer. Very exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, getting back to basics. So talking about Office 365, what it is, and what you can do with it. So just really quickly, I'll start off with an intro of who I am. So I'm Jill Hanneman. As Sasha mentioned, I'm with Witham Smith & Brown. So we were formerly Portal Solutions, and over the past month and a half, on May 1st, Portal Solutions merged with Witham Smith & Brown. Witham Smith & Brown is a top 30 accounting firm in the country, and this merger has really brought a lot to the Portal Solutions team as well as the Witham team, being able to have a larger infrastructure base and customer pool for us to draw from. And for Witham, we are an extension now of their services and capabilities of their team. And so as a result, our team is still intact, and we're doing what we do. So I have been in this space now for over 10 years, about 15 years actually. And so I've been working in knowledge management, helping companies organize their unstructured information and leveraging technology and leveraging tools like Sharepoint and Office 365 as a means to provide that type of structure. So when I work with Office 365 and when I work with SharePoint, I'm always trying to figure out how can we make this more usable? How can we improve the way knowledge is captured? How can we improve the way we're storing and filing our electronic files, our Word documents, our PDFs? How can we improve records management and retention of our content? So I also, on a personal note, I really like to cook and I really like to bake. And so right now I'm working on biscuits and trying all different kinds of biscuit recipes. So it's just kind of the baked product du jour for me. So as I mentioned, Portal Solutions is now with Witham Smith & Brown. And as a result, we have become the Microsoft Solutions and Services team within Witham. So nothing has really changed about who we are and what we do. We're still doing the same work we did before, and we're doing it for the same customers, and we're doing it for more customers now, which is very exciting. But just a bit about our history. So we have done over 350 plus implementations of Office 365 and SharePoint. And we started working with Office 365 from one of its earliest iterations. We did deployments back in January of 2012 when Office 365 was just coming out into the marketplace, and it was very bleeding edge. So we've seen it grow, we've seen a lot of the capabilities change and mature, and we rode out that questionable period of whether or not SharePoint was dead. So coming out at the end of that and knowing that SharePoint is alive and well, we are alive and well and still excited about deploying really awesome, cool services and solutions to our customers. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to just go over Office 365, what its features are, how it fits into the workplace. And I have a quick demo for you all to kind of walk you through Office 365 so you can get more context as to how these features fit into how I'm describing them to you. And then we're going to talk a bit about how to get started. with Office 365, and then moving into a roadmap to introduce the features. So before we do that, I'd like to bring you all into the conversation, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about where you are in your journey with Office 365. So I am going to post a poll here, and hopefully you all can give me some feedback. So quick little bit of housekeeping while you guys are answering the poll. I do have a little bit of a cold right now, and luckily this is a webinar, so there's no spreading of any germs or anything, but I may have to cough spontaneously in the middle of our conversation. So if that happens, I'm just gonna casually go on mute and just kind of let you guys know what's happening. But just wanted to give you a heads up that I am not gonna abandon our conversation, but I also don't want to have to subject you to the coughing that I'm going through at the moment. All right, I think we are still getting a couple of responses in. I'm going to give it a few more seconds. Okay. All right, we are closing the poll. All right, so I'm sharing the results with you all, and it looks like 38% are still in the research phase, you're still shopping around, and 38% you're using it, but not to its fullest capacity. And then we have a few others. We've completely rolled out Office 365 and we're using it well, and we've purchased it, but we're not using it yet. So we have some folks who are just kind of looking to learn more about it, and we have some folks who are using it and trying to figure out how to use more of it. So that's kind of the majority of the audience. So we'll continue from there, but good to know where you guys are all at. So thank you for the feedback. All right, so jumping into about Office 365 and what it is, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the digital workplace. And this is not a concept that, is completely foreign and or exclusive to Office 365. However, the more that I work with Office 365 and the more the features are coming out, the more I start to really understand and see myself how Office 365 is starting to exemplify the concept of the digital workplace. So really a place and environment, and in this case it's a cloud environment where employees and users are able to quickly and easily share what they know, find what they need with consistent experiences across any device and across any location. So when you start to think about what is Office 365, you also want to think about how this is actually just a tool for communication and how it's responding to today's marketplace. And so working together today, the term of working together really looks like people collaborating across multiple offices, people collaborating across time zones, many teams collaborating with one another, or people collaborating across teams with people you may not have even met in person before. It's working with your core team every day and those folks every day. It's also you yourself and how you store your content and where you put it and how you retrieve it and how you share it with others. So you kind of have this one-to-many, many-to-many, many-to-one type scenario. So it's really flexible and it really has no boundary. Just another form of another example of this is I actually live in Seattle, and majority of our team is on the East Coast, and we live, the digital workplace every single day, working out of multiple offices, multiple time zones, with many different teams, and with ourselves and with others. And so tools like Office 365 really come in handy in responding to the demands of what the workforce is asking for these days, and what the millennial generation is demanding, the type of comfort and the type of flexibility that the workforce is asking for out of employers these days. So you look at the different types of channels of communication that we have. So it's not just about phone calls, and it's not just about email anymore, but people are traveling. People are using video calls. We're doing screen sharing to convey ideas, to share information. We're leveraging messages and voicemails still, but news feeds are a new idea that have burgeoned into the workplace. So how can we make it a lot easier for people to leave information, ask questions of one another without having to know someone's phone number or know exactly who to call or who to ask? And that's really what this technology is responding to and bringing to the table for the workplace. And I think it's really exciting, but again, the challenge is always, how do you make it work for you, and how do you make it sustainable in your business? So when you look at the digital workplace, again, it's accessible from any device. And essentially what Office 365 is, it's a collection of apps and cloud services. And ultimately, these are all functions of what you're trying to do in the workplace. We have websites to share information, email, document management, calendaring, data that needs to be shared and collected and analyzed. We're taking notes in meetings, and how do we take those notes and make something meaningful out of those notes? We have apps that are providing line of business applications, line of business tasks and automation. CRM is one of those pieces as well that ties in deeply as almost a line of business application. But how do we stay connected? How do we track our customer base? How do we manage sales opportunities? Collaboration, how do we work with each other? Project management, task management, and how do we make sure that we're all connected, and what tools are available to help us with project management? And then at the heart of it, we have Microsoft Office, which has still remained a pinnacle of desktop publishing and workplace productivity. So all of these things are connected by search now. And if you think about what is Office 365, we have each one of these circles represented by a workload within Office 365. And again, accessible by a mobile device, on tablet, through your browser, anywhere, whatever you need. So this is what I like to call our 30,000-foot view of what Office 365 is. And having looked at a lot of Microsoft's websites around Office 365, everything's very disparate. And when you ask Microsoft, how do we get started? They don't really give you the full picture of how all of these pieces play together and what the full scope of what everything is. All right. So when we take a look at this picture, we've kind of broken it up into a couple of different components. So user productivity applications, productivity services, productivity applications, and then over on the Azure side, the connection between your on-premises Active Directory and any infrastructure as a service, any other web services or custom development applications that you have, and how that connects to the Office 365 ecosystem. But you'll see a couple things on here that are very familiar. So SharePoint, being a focal point of productivity services. We also have OneDrive for Business, Delve, Office video streams, Skype for Business, Yammer, Groups, Voice, PBX, eDiscovery, and Exchange. And then under user productivity, we have, the Office products, Office Desktop, Office Online, Project in Visio, Visio Online, OneNote, Skype for Business, Sway, and Office Mobile. When we get into productivity applications, these are some that we'll go over, and a lot of these are very new and are some of the value add applications that really make Office 365 a very value add product. And if you were thinking about SharePoint on premises and wondering what you might not get with leveraging SharePoint on premises instead of Office 365, these are some of those applications that you might be missing out on. So we'll go through each of these as well, but it's a very crowded landscape, and every single month and every few weeks, Microsoft is releasing new features and new enhancements to every single one of these areas. Every month, it might be minor, it might be major, but these releases are coming, and they're slowly closing the gap on any user experience discrepancies or other hindrance to the technology that they're hearing from customers about. So we're going to go through these pieces and try to dive a little bit deeper, and I'm going to try to give you guys a little bit more explanation on what each of these pieces are, so you can get a better idea of the landscape of the digital workplace, or at least the digital workplace in the context of Office 365. So for user productivity, we have Office, and a lot of organizations that I talk to actually end up going to Office 365, or they end up purchasing Office Pro Plus. And Office Pro Plus just provides you with the licensing structure to get the latest updates for the Office suite whenever they're released. So if you were an organization who previously, you were living on Office 2007 or Office 2010, then this gets you up to Office 2016, and essentially Office Pro Plus just becomes versionless because you're always going to be getting the incremental updates. And this is a great way to, it can be a negotiation in your licensing with Microsoft around how you consume Office and how you get Office from them, and you get it to your folks. Project and Visio are also available within an online context, and Visio is actually a recent addition, and it's very cool that now you can still leverage Visio in an online format and consume it and edit it on any device anywhere. So as a business analyst, I create workflows and document workflows all the time. And so it's great knowing that I can access these documents and change them or modify them on any device if I'm at the airport, on my iPad, all those types of things. The Office mobile apps are also really cool. So if you are looking for that mobile experience, each one of these items has its own distinct app that you can consume on your iPhone, in an Android phone, or your Windows phone. And while they are disparate, it does give you that mobile access. So I think the ones that I probably use the most often are OneDrive for Business, Skype for Business, and SharePoint. OneNote is also available, and OneNote is now embedded in a lot of different productivity features, which is great, and allows you to have team notebooks, individual notebooks, and it's just a great tool. Everyone I've ever talked to always loves OneNote. It's a great tool. And then we get to Skype for Business and Sway. So Skype for Business can be, one of the features that you're looking to Office 365 as the primary adoption. You might be also evaluating it against other video and web conferencing tools, or you may get it because you're going to Office 365 and you may choose to retire the other web and video conferencing tools that you previously were spending a lot of money on. And so this is kind of an interesting value add. It's either something that can help you reduce your bottom line, or it could be the reason why you're moving to Office 365. And then the last piece here, Sway, is a presentation builder. So it is, it's compared to PowerPoint. However, it is very different. It is actually more like building web pages with interactive capabilities. So it's allowing you to almost build like a web page where you can present information, you can have videos on there. There's even translation available for some of the video resources that you have on there, and allows you to just have interactive display of information that you're sharing to people. So this is really a one-to-many type communication reference, and it's being treated almost like a Word or a PowerPoint when you create a new item in Office 365. So you'll see when you go create new document, you can see a Sway, PowerPoint, Excel, or Word as options, which is really interesting. So for productivity services, that big block in the middle, this is where you have a lot of the meat. And this is where you're probably going to be wanting to create your strategy around how you use Office 365. So when you think about what do we use for what and when, it mainly has to do with these capabilities, because you're going to have some overlap with what some of these things do. So Yammer, Groups, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business, they all, store documents, they facilitate communication, they facilitate file storage. They're all tied together through search and through delve. So it becomes a kind of confusing landscape as far as what to use when. But when you're thinking about your strategy and when you're thinking about how you want to position Office 365 to your users, you're going to be focusing on these services and understanding how you want to use what for what. So for OneDrive for Business, it's a pretty straightforward proposition. So every user gets their own OneDrive for Business account. And if any of you are familiar with SharePoint and SharePoint 2010 and 2007, we all had My Sites. So the OneDrive for Business is essentially a really large storage My Site for your users. It's a personal storage, file storage area. So documents can be shared here, but it's not really a collaborative site, if you will. It's not really a collaborative document library. It's a place for people to store their own individual documents, and then they can share them from that point forward. But it has a really large storage capacity with 5 terabytes per user. And so I really hope no individual user ever gets to 5 terabytes, because I can't imagine what that content cleanup would end up looking like. But it's very flexible, so it gives you a lot of options there. And then we get into groups. And I have another slide on groups to try and unpack groups a little bit more. But this has become probably the most confusing construct, especially for people coming from a SharePoint world, about what and how to use groups. And so the way we're seeing it come out from Microsoft, groups will be the underlying structure for collaboration and for team sites, for kind of that team collaborative type environment moving forward. So they're really tying the groups to the Outlook architecture, infrastructure, and it has a lot of really cool capabilities managing it together. And what we're also starting to see is with some of these monthly releases, Groups is becoming more tied in to the other workloads within Office 365. So I'll dive into that a little bit more in a few slides. Then we get into Delve, and Delve is tied to the machine learning aspect. So it's combining search, helping you search, and also understanding and indexing your behavior and who you work with. So it's looking at people, it's looking at files, it's looking at what it is that you're doing, and content, context of content of what you're working on. So it's taking all of those components and it's promoting discovery within the Office 365 environment, which is making that, that user experience a lot more personalized. So it's helping to create that automated personalized experience about what's trending, what is it that the people that you work with most often, what are they working on, what are those subjects, what files are they using the most. And so it's creating that experience that makes Office 365 so powerful and such a compelling tool. Delve is also a piece that you can't get with SharePoint on premises. So if you are wedded to SharePoint on premises and you want Delve, then you are looking at venturing into a hybrid environment. So now we get into the productivity applications, and this is where the suite starts to get really interesting, and you're starting to see a lot of the new features that have been coming out for Office 365. So Teams, I'll show you guys this in the demo, threaded conversation channels, it's that persistent chat. And whereas before Office 365 didn't have any kind of persistent chat competitor to some of the other products in the marketplace, Teams has come into the scene, and it's likened to Slack. And you know, I've talked with a lot of companies who have completely done away with email, and all they use is Teams as a way to manage communication, to keep those threaded conversations, to manage information retention. And it really works for teams that need to work internally with one another and don't really have a whole lot of external communication. So it's great for knowledge retention, it's great for searchability, it's great for reducing the time spent in email, and it's also great for reducing the clutter that you get in email. So email becomes a very specific function for other types of information exchange and things that need to be in writing or exchanged with external partners and customers. And Teams can become the internal channel for exchanging information, asking questions, finding things. So the other cool part about Teams is that it integrates seamlessly with Skype for Business. So you can manage meetings, you can manage instant messaging, you can call people directly from Teams. So it's that idea that Teams becomes the dashboard, the productivity dashboard that your people might work out of all day instead of Outlook. So kind of radical, kind of a departure of thought, but there are some companies that this is really working for them. So then we get into Power Apps, and I'm going to tie Power Apps and Flow together. And there's another item on here that I don't have listed, but it's called the Common Data Service. And so what Microsoft is doing and what the Power Apps, Flow, and Common Data Service team are doing is they're basically coming up with their response to InfoPath retirement or forms and workflow in Office 365. So Power Apps, while it can do a lot of different things, Power Apps is kind of intended to be sort of like a form app generator and allowing business users or savvy business users to create a form that then can capture data in the common data service. And then flow is the workflow that the form can follow to gain any approval, signature, or to put information in any particular part of Office 365. So any type of segmented business process flow, that's what you would leverage flow for. And then Power Apps could be the form, the front end facing form where a user would interact with that data. And then Common Data Service would be the database backend that captures that data. So there's a lot more to unpack here, and we're not going to really have the time to dive into all of this, but the licenses for this are tied to licenses for Office 365, but if you have a lot of volume, then there is a separate license fee for the suite for Power Apps Flow and Common Data Service. So moving on to Power BI and Analytics, Power BI only comes with the E5 license plan. However, you can subscribe individually to Power BI, and it is a very powerful data visualization tool, allowing you to model data leveraging Excel and to display them graphically and in real time, very, very interactive dashboards and data visualization, allowing for natural language querying, which is super cool. And so if you've ever seen it in action, it's visually very impressive. And for any C-level looking to consume their data real time in a very sophisticated way, you got to give them Power BI because they'll love it. And if you can find a way to automate the data to get into their Power BI dashboards, you will get a promotion. I promise. So analytics, there's also this piece for My Analytics, which gives you some insights into how you are spending your day. And so that kind of also ties into Delve, and I'll show you guys a quick demo about this. But the analytics piece is kind of interesting to give you some analysis on your own productivity, which, through some training, through some HR initiatives, could be a really cool feature that you never got before that you might be interested in. Planner is another feature, and we're kind of dubbing it a project light, if you will. So it allows for task management against timelines, and allows a team to meet collectively or have a common interface so that they can update progress, they can check off objects, they can work on a common task together without having the rigor of MS Project. But there is MS Project in Office 365. And then the last piece is Dynamics 365. So a combination of ERP and CRM, and you have two different levels, Enterprise, Business Edition. It is cloud hosted, it is accessible through Office 365. You can do Dynamics 365 on its own. So the power of Dynamics is come online in a consumable way, and it's now integrating with all of the different features. So the integration is not completely there yet, but as a tool itself, it is quite powerful. All right, so Office groups. So I'll show you guys this in a second, but essentially an Office group runs off of the Outlook service, the Outlook workload. And so you access your groups and you can create your groups through Outlook, and it's another component of the navigation on the left-hand side of Outlook. So when you create a group, essentially what it's doing is it's creating a distribution list. So it's the conversations can be similar to just creating like a new email to a distribution list. So you have a set group of 5 or 10 people working on a team for a project for a period of time, and you want to email that group consistently throughout the duration of your work, and that's what a conversation could be, and it's essentially creating a distribution list. So the other piece to all of this now is that when you create a group, your distribution list is getting a calendar, you're getting an area to store files, you are getting a team OneNote notebook. There are available connectors to tie in any Flow or Power apps to your Office group. You get Planner, so that this team can now manage tasks and timeline events associated with their project, and you get a site. So now you're getting a SharePoint team site with your group. So these pieces are all tied together now so that you can manage files in a document library with the rigorous pieces that you get from a document library: ability to group, content types, metadata, filtering, etc. And you get the functions of the group from Outlook. So these are tied together now. So is a team in Microsoft Teams, the conversation with the group. And as of May or April, Microsoft announced the tie-in of a Yammer group to Office groups. So now if you create a Yammer group, you will also, or you can also, create an Office group. So now when you have a newsfeed group running out of Yammer, it can also be tied to your Office group with your notebook, your planner, your files, your calendar, and other email conversations. So what we're starting to see here is the group construct becoming a very predominant theme of having all the tools you could possibly want for collaboration. That's it. So I think what we'll see in the months to come is, some of the clunkiness of bringing all these products together will hopefully start to work themselves out and become a lot more smooth in transition. But this is really where it's headed. So if you are a legacy SharePoint user, the idea of just having a plain team site is, it's still available to you, but the group is really where you're going to get the more robust technology. Okay, so it's time for another poll, and I would like to just get this feedback from you all, and this is mainly targeted at the group of people, 38% of you who said, we're using it, but we're not using it to its fullest capacity. So I'm curious, if you are using Office 365, which workload would you like to be using more of? And for those of you who are not using it, perhaps use this question in the context of, why are you interested in Office 365, and what is drawing you to, which workload is drawing you to Office 365? So we'll give it a minute to capture some responses there. Okay, think we've gotten a lot of great feedback. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share the results with you guys. So it seems that the overwhelming winner of what you would like to be using more of are teams and groups. And then coming tied for second place are both OneDrive for Business and Exchange Outlook Email. So I think that Exchange Outlook Email is probably the main reason why those of you who are not using Office 365 yet are looking at Office 365, and that's cool. And then we have SharePoint Online and then Other. So, it's really interesting to think how these other features of Office 365, aside from these top four, are value adds, but they're not necessarily drivers, which I think is very interesting. All right, so we are going to transition to a quick demo, and I'm going to just walk you guys through Office 365 and the experience really quickly, and then we'll continue to move through the conversation. Okay, so when you log into Office 365 for the first time, so I'm Karen Berg, and you can see my identity up here on the right. You get this good afternoon or good morning, and you see all of the app tiles available to you as a user. So this is where you come in. It's not a traditional website experience, and we're kind of seeing a departure from that traditional website experience that is so common with SharePoint. So you have all of the different apps available to you, and if you click on any of the apps, it's going to launch it into a new window, a new tab in your browser. So there are some pros and cons to all of this, right? In the one hand, it's nice that you don't lose that root. You don't lose your place, and it just creates a new tab for you. But subsequently, you're going to create a million tabs if you're clicking on a bunch of apps to get to them. So, Outlook, very similar to the interface that you have now. So if you're using Outlook 2016, the UI isn't too different. So you have some cleanup of the ribbon up above, and the ribbon doesn't really exist that much anymore, but you still have the same fairly intuitive preview pane and navigation. There's also this piece called Focused, which is a way of filtering out the clutter or filtering out any messages that don't seem that might be like spam for you. So it's another one of a way of improving productivity. But what I want to point out to you is this on the left. So you have your folders, and this is fairly common, right? So your folders for Outlook, but then you have this area called groups, and this is how you navigate to the different groups that you are a member of within Office 365. And this also shows up in the desktop app for Outlook as well, the desktop client for Outlook. So when you have Outlook 2016 and it's tied to your Office 365 Exchange account, the groups will show up in there as well. And I think there also might be a tie-in to have Windows 10, I think. So to go into a group, just to share what that looks like. And again, this is it's a really amped up distribution list. So we're working out of Outlook. It's pulling together, members, and these members are simply, we're pulling in their AD information, their email, and they're tied to this group now. And when you look at the group, you have this navigation pane of these items. So conversations are simply emails, and they are allowing you to, just send emails, threaded conversations through your group to all the members, and it shows up in their inbox. Or you can come here and see an aggregated view, a filtered view of just the emails to the group here. So you can create new, reply all, forward, and it's kind of having a little hiccup right now. Your calendar, which is the team calendar for that group. And again, you kind of navigate, using the pane below, very similar. So back to mail, going back to manufacturing. We have files. and it could be thinking our whole life here. I'm also going to click, I just clicked on Notebook here, and what it does is it launches a new tab to our OneNote shared notebook. And so what's really cool about this is that it's real-time editing. So I could be in a meeting with, the other 25 people who are in this manufacturing management group, and we could all be taking our own page of notes in here, and it would all reconcile and get stored collectively as team notes in our group, which is really cool because if you've ever walked out of a meeting and someone said, hey, do you mind sharing your notes? You don't have to send them an email, or you don't have to cut and paste anything into an email to share the notes. You can just say, hey, it's in our team notebook. Isn't that cool? And they can come here and leverage it. So the only thing about the web version, if you are a big OneNote user, and I personally like to create different boxes, it's very flat. So you don't have the same capabilities as you do in the OneNote desktop app. So it's a little bit different. You may have to adjust your strategy ever so slightly. So connectors, this is how you can tie in a Power App or a Flow to your group. And that could be if you want to have a form that kicks off something, or if you have content that, once it reaches a certain phase, it moves to a different site in a SharePoint Online site. So all of those things can happen, and you can establish the connection here. So you'll see this connectors in SharePoint Online as well. And then under more, that's how you access Planner, and that's how you access the site. And this is the SharePoint team site that's associated then with your group. So that is your group. There is your OneNote notebook. So people, so when you click on people in your waffle, in your app launcher here, it's going to show you, and this is Delve at work, it's going to show you the people that you frequently contact, and you're emailing with them very often, you're sharing, you're collaborating on the same documents together, the people who are on your calendar. So it's just kind of a shortcut of accessing people or trying to remember who it is that you work with, or if you want to send something to them. When we click on OneDrive for Business, when we click on the OneDrive app launcher, it'll launch our OneDrive for Business site. And so this is the web interface. But again, with OneDrive, you are able to create the sync client, which then allows you on your desktop to use File Explorer to store and navigate documents, copy, paste, share, etc. So it's very, very convenient to use, and it is that user experience that allows people to who are very familiar using File Explorer to continue to use File Explorer to manage their documents. So personally, I actually rarely come to the actual browser view of my OneDrive for Business. I'm pretty much almost exclusively using File Explorer for it, and it always syncs up, and if I need a file, I can access it on my phone through the app, or I can access it on another computer if I happen to be somewhere else. So it's also tied to groups over here on the left. So there's my manufacturing, there's sales and marketing. So we can have different sites tied to our OneDrive for Business, but these are all my documents. And you can see right here that I'm sharing them only with myself. So I'm the only one who can see any of these documents. But if I wanted to share this chemical spill emergency procedures document, I can select the document, and I can send a link. And so I can select my VP of Sales Operations, Julian Isla. And again, Active Directory, it'll provide a suggestion to you. So I can send it, I can copy a link, I can just send an Outlook, and I can send it off to him, and he will be able to view and edit this document. So it's a little bit slow. But ultimately what you would end up seeing is after I finish sharing this document, okay, here we go. So now you can see that it's now shared with other people. So if I were to click on that, I can now see, I can change my permissions, I can see who has access, and I can see the recent activity. So again, this is the modern view of a document library, but it has all of the same capabilities that SharePoint document libraries had. And essentially OneDrive for Business account is a document library, a site collection and a document library. But what I like here is that you can see who you shared things with, and you can have folders, you can have additional columns. Your OneDrive for Business is also subject to the compliance and records management capabilities that spread across Office 365 as well. So all really good stuff. So next piece is when you get to SharePoint, you click on SharePoint, it's going to drop you onto a page that looks like this. So it's going to show you the sites that you frequently visit. It's going to also suggest sites to you that you might be interested in. So this is part of that discovery idea. So it's kind of, you can also create another tile. So hypothetically, if you want your intranet to be an Office 365 site collection, and you want people to be able to land on your homepage for your intranet, you could create a tile for the intranet and have that be a part of your tenant. And so when they land and they click on that, they actually land on a real page. So this is the operations page within a site collection for SharePoint Online within this tenant. And you can have landing pages similar to this. This has a slightly amped up UI, but it's still fairly out of the box. So when you go to a site, you can see we've got a page viewer web part with a Visio diagram in it. Our web parts, a web part for documents displaying the most recent documents that have entered the page. And so you can go through the different sites. So you can still have kind of like that site navigation type look and feel to it. So you can click on different departments. You can have sub-departments, pages within your structure, and you can have kind of that hierarchical web page like experience through SharePoint Online. And again, the document libraries have all the same power of, workflow, document routing, metadata filtering. It's subject to the Compliance and Security Center for records management and e-discovery. So you get all those cool things. This is just a view of a team site. And so a team site that's associated with a group. It still looks like SharePoint 2013 for the most part. The look and feel hasn't really changed that much. So there's not a whole lot of surprising stuff there. And here's a view of teams. And this is where we're at with teams. So your navigation pane is on the left. You can take a look at your activity on the activity pane, and that will give you notifications of any new messages that have come in or whatnot. And when you go to a team, you can see the thread here. And typing into a thread is very simple. So I can say, Julian, where is the new reseller agreement? And I can post that. He would get a notification. He can then reply to me. You can like these. You can save the message. So there's a lot of different components here. And you can also add subjects. So we could also say, reseller agreement updates. At Julian. And we can we can start a subject-based threaded discussion there. So with our teams, we also have the ability to upload documents. We can open it in SharePoint as well. So you're starting to see all the different places and the ways that these are starting to connect, but it's still not completely smooth. So it does bring about a lot of governance challenges and thoughts. So moving along, I'll show you guys quickly. I'm realizing we're running out of time. So here's a view of Delve. And when you drop into Delve, it's going to just show you in this tile-like format what documents it's suggesting to you. And so this is part of that discovery mechanism of being able to see, based on who you work with, what type of documents you work on, what type of documents the people you work with work on. And it's going to suggest things to you so it's easy and fast to access. It'll also prescribe people that it thinks that you want to work with. And then I'll also show you the My Analytics piece, which is another link within your Delve page. And so under your My Analytics, it can show you data on how you're interacting within Office 365. So meeting hours, email hours, focus hours, after hours. So when, how often are you emailing after hours? And, it's based on some constructs that you're putting into Outlook and what time zone you're in and all that kind of stuff. So it can kind of give you some analysis of what you do. Staying in touch, who do you work with? So when I work with Julian, I work with him for about 5.5 hours a day. That's a lot. And what this usually does is it populates how long it takes for Julian to respond to your emails, which is kind of funny and an interesting data point. So your meeting habits, how this is working. And, all this data is really pertaining to how can you be more thoughtful about how you spend your time during your day, and how can you influence the rest of the workforce? How can we all be more productive? And this is just some data to look in the mirror a little bit and see how you work better. The last piece I'll show you guys is Yammer. And again, like I mentioned, now when you create a new Yammer group, it can create a Office 365 group. So before, these two were completely disparate, but now they are starting to talk with one another. There's still a lot of caveats associated with that connection, but you can iron out the details if that's the path you decide to go. You can also choose to, if you want to create a group and you don't want it to create a new Office 365 group as well. But again, threaded discussions, that newsfeed type experience. So actually, this is showing you our Portal Solutions Yammer instance. And so you can kind of see, this is opening the kimono a little bit, showing you guys how we use our Yammer instance. Okay, so going back to our getting started with Office 365. So first things first, I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet and get more to the road mapping, but get your users logged in. And I think understanding the pain points and how different it is to log in to Office 365 and what that experience is like, there needs to be some hand-holding and making sure that people understand they should check off, keep me logged in, so that they don't have to consistently keep putting in their credentials if they're trying to access their content or trying to access email or access a SharePoint page. And then the next piece, get the latest Office suite deployed for them. If you're in an E3, E5 license plan for Office 365, that should be the first thing you do. So for your roadmap strategy, like I was mentioning before in the blue productivity services piece, that's really where you kind of want to define your baseline for your digital workplace. And even if you don't want to call it a a digital workplace, what is your baseline for how you are planning on consuming Office 365? Are you going to be starting with Exchange? Are you going to be starting with email? And then will you grow to OneDrive for Business? Or are you looking to improve collaboration and provide collaborative sites? Do you want to use groups? And how will you use groups? And how will your users navigate through groups? So you need to prioritize those workloads and figure out, based on your need, how you want to roll a lot of these pieces out. And that's going to give you the basis for developing your roadmap for how you can envision rolling these things out. I'm going to say that I've seen a lot of different strategies. A lot of companies have just opened it up. They deployed Exchange, and then they said, we're not going to hide any tiles. Good luck. Call us if you need help, but use and consume. And I've seen that fail more often than not. In addition to the fact that, if we give it to them, if we give them the keys to the house, will they just start using it and move in? You can also start, losing control of the information that goes in there. And so starting off, also thinking about your compliance and your security strategy, records management, anything that could put your organization at risk needs to be addressed through this as well. So in the green box, each workload is going to need some type of governance. And what I mean by that is, even if Power BI is only going to be used by, 3 people in your entire company, you need to figure out who those 3 people are. Or for groups, are you going to let everyone be able to create a group, or do you want to lock that down to a specific security group, access group? So defining the rules of the road is really important. Most of these workloads are going to require some type of training or overview or introduction. So not only can you just orient them to what is this tool, but what are our rules of the road, and who has access to what, and how am I supposed to use this in the context of my work? So again, not everyone will use every workload, but the workloads that are in that blue box that I showed you in the beginning are the ones that mostly everybody's going to touch. When you get into, Power Apps, Flow, you may not have everybody using everything. But, likewise, I'd like to encourage curiosity, because you get those power users, you get those evangelists who are interested in using the tools, which is really cool. So creating a roadmap. What's your digital workplace roadmap? And this can be, this is set up in the context of, we typically see people go and do an email cutover first. Because email migrations can be fairly finite and short and sweet. You can work through that piece and roadmap that and get everyone on their email and their user profiles moved over to Office 365. And so that's a great entry point. And then from that point forward, starting to think about how will we use the other workloads. So now let's start thinking about site planning. Do we want to use SharePoint Online? Do we want to get an intranet set up? Do we want to just get some basic collaboration sites? How do we want to tie in any custom solutions? Do we want to build in workflow? Do we want to start migrating other files into this environment? So you roadmap those pieces out. You think incrementally around the capabilities that you're looking to add to your environment. So I tend to recommend that you not think in terms of workload exclusively. From an IT perspective, it becomes something by default that you have to do. Okay, sorry guys. So working through your roadmap, really, really great piece. Also thinking through, what is the best tool for the job? And this is just kind of one view of thinking through all the different functions and the way that people communicate in your organization and how they can work through those pieces. Whew, very sorry, guys. I know we're running over a bit, and we just have a few more slides to go through, but I thank you for your patience. So one way that we look at governing Office 365, tenant administration, security and compliance, workload, roles and responsibilities, and then finally content management. So this is just one way of thinking through holistically from the top down of how you approach defining your governance plan for Office 365. And again, I do recommend coming at it with a strategy. You don't have to use every workload, and some of them you can hide the tiles, and you can choose what you want to use and what you want to give access to, because you may have other tools in-house that are already doing some of these things. And that's completely fine, and we see that in a lot of, almost every instance. But coming up with that strategy of how you're going to use it is really key, instead of just kind of opening the doors and hoping it works out. The last piece I'm going to show you is just an idea that we have, and one that we're using for our own governance is a guide to what to use when. And this is a way of an information piece that you can give to your users around, when do I use groups? What kind of content goes into groups? When do I use Yammer? What type of content goes into Yammer, and how do I use that? What kind of content goes into OneDrive for Business? How do I use that? And so it kind of goes through the workloads, and it puts it into context around content that your users use on a daily basis. So it speaks their language, it's relatable to the culture of your organization, but it ties back to when and how to use some of these pieces. Okay, and we have gone over, but I really hope that this has been helpful to you. We would love the feedback, and as a next step, if this has at all been helpful to you, we can help you further. We have a customer immersion experience, which actually allows you to go through, similar to the demo we just did, but you're able to click through it, and you're able to drive through the process and click through these pieces, see how you like it, talk with your colleagues about how this would fit back into your organization, and to actually get some feedback from people who might really use it. So it's more of like a really amped up hands-on demo environment that we do for an hour, and allows you to click through and use these pieces without being driven through. So it's guided. We provide the guidance to narrate you through the experience and how to discover the different capabilities. But it's a really great way of trying it on, if you will, before you make a commitment. And so with that, I'm unfortunately, I'm not sure if we're going to have a chance to answer any questions just because we're so over. Sasha, do we want to just respond to them via email?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Jill. That was good. And we will send out a link, like I said, to the webinar and the recording and to the deck. And so I think we can address the questions by email, probably just for sake of time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your patience today. And it was a really great conversation. So thank you for your feedback in the polls, and good luck. And I hope you love using Office 365. Thanks.